Text message came in at 6:17 on a Thursday morning, almost a year to the day after they walked me out the front door with a cardboard box and a bottle of water. I was sitting on my back porch in Beaumont, watching the sun come up over the refinery stacks across the bay, when my phone buzzed. "Mr. Doolan, this is Yusuf Demir from Anatolia Petrochemical. I am calling regarding a serious safety compliance matter at Gulf Cyprus Industries. Are you available to speak today?" I read it twice. Then I read it twice. Then I read it a third time, just to be sure I wasn't seeing things. I set my coffee down on the railing, walked back inside, and pulled the binder off my bookshelf. The one labeled Operational Continuity, reference copy in black Sharpie. I kept it for almost 13 months, hadn't opened it once. My name's Curtis Doolan. I'm 53. For the last 11 years before they restructured me, I was the process safety manager at Gulf Cyprus Industries, a mid-sized petrochemical outfit that ran cracker units and ethylene processing along the Sabine-NH waterway in southeast Texas. Before that, I spent 18 years in the Coast Guard, the last 6 as a marine safety officer running compliance inspections on chemical tankers coming through the Houston Ship Channel. Different uniforms, same job. You make sure the dangerous stuff doesn't get loose. People who don't work in petrochem don't really get it. When a software company has a bad quarter, they lay off some folks and pivot. When a chemical plant has a bad quarter on safety, somebody loses a hand, or a town gets evacuated, or a worker's wife gets a phone call she'll remember for the rest of her life. Process safety isn't a department. It's the whole reason you get to keep operating. But that's not how the new vice president saw it. I remember the morning everything started because it was the same morning I'd brought in donuts for the maintenance crew. Tuesday in February, raining sideways, the kind of Gulf Coast cold that gets into your bones. We had our quarterly leadership review at 9. I sat in my usual seat with my coffee and my binder of OSHA process safety management documentation, and that's when Preston Marbury walked in like he owned the place. Preston was the CEO's stepson, 28 years old, MBA from somewhere up in the Northeast, freshly minted title of Vice President of Operational Modernization. His mother had married Hank Marbury, our CEO, about 3 years prior. Preston had been working in management consulting in Chicago. Now he was here, drinking some kind of mushroom coffee out of a Yeti tumbler, wearing dress shoes that had never seen a plant floor. He clicked through a slide deck called Eliminating Operational Drag Phase 1. Real corporate buzzword stuff. Frameworks and synergies, outcome-driven KPIs. I sat there waiting for somebody to ask a question. Nobody did. Hank just sat at the head of the table nodding like a bobblehead. Then Preston put up a slide that had my entire team on it. The process safety department. 5 people. Me, 2 engineers, an environmental specialist, and an admin who'd been with the company since 1998. He said, and I'll never forget this phrasing, process safety is a legacy cost center. We can absorb these functions through automated audit software and a part-time contracted reviewer. He said it like he was announcing the weather. He projected the savings on the next slide. My salary plus benefits ran about $148,000 a year. The whole department came to roughly $480,000 a year. The whole department came to roughly $490,000. Preston had this little shimmy he did when he hit his closing point, like a guy at a sales conference. Almost $500,000 in annual EBITDA recovery with no operational impact. No operational impact. No operational impact. I capped my pen. I closed my binder. I asked Preston if he could spell PSM. He laughed. He thought I was joking. Hank cleared his throat and said something about trusting the modernization vision and asked if anyone had questions. I had about 1,000. I asked exactly 0. 18 years in uniform teaches you something important. When somebody is about to walk into a minefield, they laid themselves. You don't talk them out of it. You just step back and make sure your boots are clean. I went back to my office that afternoon and started a new spreadsheet. Not an angry spreadsheet, a careful one. Every regulatory designation that had my name on it, every signed document, every certification where I was listed as the responsible party. The OSHA 1910-119 Process Hazard Analysis. The EPA Risk Management Plan. The Tier 2 reporting under EPCRA, the State of Texas Air Quality Permits, the Coast Guard Facility Security Plan, since we have dock access. 23 separate filings, all with Curtis Doolan listed as the signatory authority. I made copies, not for revenge. For the record, anybody who's ever worked compliance in heavy industry will tell you the same thing. When leadership changes course, you don't argue, you document. I emailed scanned copies to my personal email with timestamps. I printed 2 physical sets. One went home with me into the file cabinet in my study. The other one I put into a 3-inch binder, labeled neatly, and walked down to the records room on the 2nd floor of the admin building. I slid it onto the shelf marked Permits and Designations, Historical Reference, next to the old binders from the 1990s that nobody ever looked at. 3rd row from the bottom, alphabetical by department. I didn't tell a soul. Now here's the thing most people don't know. About 4 years before any of this happened, I'd written a paragraph into our Emergency Response and Regulatory Continuity Manual. Section 9.4. It was a quiet little provision, maybe 200 words. It stated that any change to the named process safety manager required formal board action and notification to OSHA Region 6 within 30 calendar days, and that absent such action, all subsequent regulatory filings would be considered submitted under the previous designation, with all attendant personal and corporate liability accruing accordingly. I'd written that paragraph after I watched a sister facility down in Corpus Christi get hammered with $4.2 million in fines for a botched compliance handoff in 2019. Their HR department had reassigned the title without filing the paperwork, and OSHA didn't find out for 9 months. Cost the CFO his job and the company a lawsuit. Section 9.4 was insurance, the kind you write hoping you'll never need. Preston didn't know it existed. Hank had signed it 4 years ago without reading past the executive summary. Our legal counsel was a contracted firm out of Houston that billed us hourly and never opened the manual unless something caught fire. 6 weeks after the announcement, HR sent me reclassification paperwork. New title, Senior Documentation Specialist. My salary cut to $74,000. My direct reports moved to report into Preston. My access to the regulatory portal was downgraded. I got a smaller cubicle on the 3rd floor, near the copier room. I signed everything. I smiled at HR. I asked if I should hand over the regulatory binders. Marcia from HR, sweet woman, 3 kids, just trying to keep her head down, said, "Oh, Preston said the new system will handle all that. Just leave them where they are." So I did. Then in early March, I submitted my resignation. 2 weeks' notice, clean as a whistle, no mention of the demotion, no interview with the local paper, no company-wide goodbye email. I packed my desk into a box, walked out through the front lobby, and shook hands with Maria, the receptionist, on the way out. She gave me a hug. She'd been there 24 years too. The IT department disabled my access by 5,000 hour PM that day. They got my last name wrong on the exit ticket. Spelled it Dolan. I noticed because I peeked over the shoulder of the help desk kid when he was processing me out. That night, my son called. Trevor's 22, junior at Texas A&M, studying chemical engineering. Smart kid. Got his mother's brains and, unfortunately, my stubbornness. "Dad, are you serious? You quit? What about my last 2 semesters? Trevor, take a breath. Your old man knows what he's doing. That's a lot of money, Dad. Mom's already covering rent on the apartment. Son, I've been planning for this for 6 weeks. Your tuition is handled. Trust me on this one. Sounds like you've got something brewing. Just following procedures. Sometimes that's all you need." That doesn't sound ominous at all. I laughed. He laughed. We hung up. That weekend, I drove down to the federal SAM.gov registry and updated my consulting credentials. I'd kept my certified process safety auditor active for years, paying the renewal fees out of my own pocket. I registered an LLC, Doolan Process Safety Advisory, and put up a basic website. By Sunday night, I had a phone line, a logo, and a $39 a month RFA MOFs at a UPS store on Gulf Way. By Wednesday, I had 3 calls. One from a refinery in Lake Charles, whose PSM coordinator had retired. One from a polymer plant outside Mobile that was facing an EPA inquiry. And one, this is the funny part, from a recruiter representing a Turkish petrochemical conglomerate that was scouting US acquisition targets. I took notes on that last one. I didn't say much, just listened. The first job paid $295 an hour. 40-hour engagement. I made more in the first 4 weeks of consulting than I would have made in 3 months at Gulf Cyprus. Meanwhile, back at the plant, things were humming along. Or so it looked. Preston had moved the process safety responsibilities to a piece of automation software called CompliForge, which a friend of his from business school sold to him for a 6-figure annual license. He'd contracted a part-time reviewer, some retired auditor in Florida, who logged in twice a month to review filings. Nobody noticed that the Federal Registry still listed Curtis Doolan as the named PSM authority. Nobody filed the 30-day notification with OSHA Region 6. Nobody updated the EPA RMP. Nobody touched Section 9.4. The clock started ticking on March 22nd. Day 1. By day 28, the violation became formally retroactive. By day 90, the daily fines escalated. PSM violations under 29 CFR 1910-119 start at around $16,000 per day for paperwork lapses. After the 90-day mark, willful or repeated classification kicks in, and you're looking at $156,000 per day in maximum penalties. Most companies never see the higher number because most companies fix things before they get there. Gulf Cyprus was not most companies. While the meter was running, I was busy. I traveled to Lake Charles, then to Mobile. By day 60, I had 4 ongoing contracts. By day 90, I needed an assistant. I hired a woman named Brenda Whitlock, a retired regulatory affairs specialist from BASF, part-time at $45 an hour. We worked out of a converted shotgun house I rented on Calder Avenue, 3 blocks from a coffee shop run by a woman named Esperanza, who made the best Café de Ola on the Gulf Coast. Esperanza's husband had worked the docks in Port Arthur for 31 years. He'd died of mesothelioma the previous spring. Asbestos in the old gantry cranes. She and I would talk in the mornings while she swept the front walk. She didn't ask about my work. I didn't ask about her grief. We just shared the quiet. One morning she said to me, "My Hector," he used to say, "the men who built the cranes never had to read the manuals. The men who came after, they didn't read them either. That's why he got sick." I thought about that for a long time. Day 110, Trevor called with news. He'd been accepted into Texas A&M's accelerated master's program in industrial hygiene and process safety. Full scholarship plus stipend. He'd been studying for the GRE on the side without telling me. "Dad," the program director said, "there's a shortage of certified PSM professionals nationwide. Starting salaries are over $100,000. You did that on your own." Well, you kind of inspired me. After what happened with you, I started reading about your field. It's interesting. There's actually job security in this stuff. There sure is, son. Always will be. You doing okay financially? I'm doing better than okay. Day 137. The press release dropped at 8 a.m. Houston time. Anatolia Petrochemical, headquartered in Istanbul, announced its intent to acquire Gulf Cyprus Industries for $267 million in cash and stock. The deal was being structured as an asset purchase with regulatory transfer, expected to close within 60 days pending due diligence. The Houston Chronicle ran a feature in the business section. Hank Marbury was quoted twice. Preston was quoted once, calling himself the architect of the operational transformation that made Gulf Cyprus an attractive international acquisition. He used the word lean 4 times in 3 sentences. I read it on my phone while sitting at Esperanza's coffee shop. I think I smiled because she walked over and refilled my cup without me asking. "Buenas noticias," she said. "Sometimes," I said. "The bill comes due." She nodded like she understood. I think she did. Day 1522. The Anatolia due diligence team arrived in Beaumont. I knew this because their lead engineer, a guy named Yusuf Demir, walked into Esperanza's coffee shop on his second morning in town. I recognized him from the company website. I'd done my homework after the press release. He didn't recognize me. Why would he? He ordered a black coffee, sat by the window, and worked on his laptop for 2 hours. I sat in the corner doing the same, 2 strangers drinking coffee in a Texas town, neither of us aware yet of how connected our weeks were about to become. Yusuf was a serious man, mid-40s, thick mustache, glasses, the kind of methodical posture you only get from working in places where your work matters. I learned later he'd spent 9 years auditing facilities for Anatolia across Europe and the Middle East before they sent him to handle their first major American acquisition. His team spent the first week reviewing financials, operational throughput, environmental records. Everything looked clean on the surface. Preston had his automation software spit out hundreds of pages of compliance summaries. The numbers were beautiful. Production was up 7%. Operational costs were down 11%. Headcount was lean. Day 159. Yusuf and a junior auditor named Daphne Aksoy were going through the records room on the second floor. Standard due diligence. They were cross-referencing the federal regulatory designations on the SAM.gov database against the company's internal personnel records. Routine. That's when Daphne pulled my binder off the shelf. Third row from the bottom, alphabetical by department, exactly where I'd left it 13 months earlier. Operational continuity. Reference copy. She opened it. She read for 15 minutes. Then she walked it down the hall to Yusuf's temporary office and shut the door behind her. I learned all of this later, of course. Yusuf told me himself, sitting at my kitchen table 6 weeks after everything fell apart. What he found in that binder was every regulatory designation, every signed document, every federal filing, all bearing the name Curtis Doolan as the responsible authority. It included the original copy of Section 9.4, highlighted in yellow. It included the OSHA Region 6 notification template, blank and unfiled. It included a one-page summary I'd written titled Continuity of PSM Authority, Required Actions Within 30 Days of Personnel Change. I typed that summary on my last Monday at the company, printed it, slid it into the front of the binder, just so nobody could ever say I hadn't left clear instructions. Yusuf cross-referenced everything against the federal databases. The math was straightforward. Day 22 through day 159. That's 107 days of unbroken violation. The first 90 days at the standard rate, around $16,000 daily, came to $1.44 million. The remaining 47 days at the willful repeat rate, capped at $156,000 daily, came to $7 day $33 million. Total exposure right around $8.77 million in OSHA penalties alone. But OSHA was just the beginning. Every Tier 2 report, every air permit renewal, every risk management plan amendment, every safety certification submitted during those 137 days had been filed under an authority that no longer legally existed, which meant those filings were void, which meant Gulf Cyprus had been operating without valid environmental and safety certifications for over 4 months, which meant they'd been representing valid regulatory compliance to customers, insurers, and one international acquirer. The numbers got bigger. EPA RMP penalties, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality fines, potential personal liability for officers under the General Duty Clause. Yusuf's team estimated total exposure could exceed $24 million before any criminal referral. That's when he picked up the phone and called Istanbul. Day 161 Thursday. Boyne 161, Thursday morning. 9 a.m. in the main conference room of Gulf Cyprus's executive suite. Hank Marbury, Preston Marbury, the CFO Beverly Ostrander, the in-house counsel Kyle Penrose, and 3 members of the board, plus Yusuf Demir, Daphne Aksoy, and a senior vice president from Anatolia named Murat Kaya. I wasn't there. I heard about it later from 2 different sources. Yusuf when he eventually became my client, and Beverly, who quit 2 weeks afterward and called me looking for consulting work. Yusuf opened the meeting by sliding a folder across the table. Who, he said in careful, accented English, is Curtis Doolan? Preston, according to Beverly, kind of laughed. He said, old guy who used to work here. We restructured his position about a year ago. Yusuf opened the folder. He is listed as your designated process safety manager. According to OSHA Region 6, EPA Region 6, and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, he remains the legally responsible authority for all regulatory filings made by this company since March 22nd of last year. Hank said, that can't be right. We removed him from that role. Where is the documentation of the removal, the board resolution, the formal notification to the agencies, the 30-day filing required under your own continuity manual, Section 9.4? The room got very quiet. Kyle Penrose, the lawyer, started flipping through his tablet. He was probably the only person in the room who actually understood what he was about to find, or rather, what he was about to fail to find. Preston tried to recover. It's a procedural thing. We can fix it. Bring Curtis back as a contractor. Sign whatever needs signing. Yusuf shook his head slowly. Mr. Marbury, you cannot retroactively cure federal compliance violations. The penalties have already accrued. The filings already submitted are already void. The misrepresentations made to my company during the negotiation phase have already occurred. Murat Kaya, who had not spoken yet, finally leaned forward. Mr. Marbury, we conducted this acquisition in good faith. We were assured that Gulf Cyprus was in full regulatory compliance. The documentation provided to us during preliminary diligence was based on filings that were legally invalid. This represents material misrepresentation. Hank's face by Beverly's account had gone completely grey. What does that mean for the acquisition? Murat took off his glasses, folded them carefully, and set them on the table. It means we are terminating discussions. Effective immediately. Our legal team will issue formal notification within 24 hours. Preston, in what Beverly described as the most pathetic moment of his life, said, "What if we bring Curtis back tomorrow, make him CEO, whatever it takes?" Yusuf almost smiled. Mr. Doolan is currently engaged in private consulting. He may not be available. That afternoon, Yusuf called me himself. That's the call I got at 6:17 in the morning, except actually it was 4:17 in the afternoon when he sent the original text. I'd misread the timestamp. Doesn't matter. The point is, he called. Mr. Doolan, this is Yusuf Demir from Anatolia Petrochemical. I am calling regarding a serious safety compliance matter at Gulf Cyprus Industries. Yes, sir. How can I help you? I have several questions about the timeline of your departure and the transition procedures that should have been implemented. I told him everything. The dates, the resignation, the absent paperwork, the IT department misspelling my last name, the binder on the shelf in the records room. Yes, he said. We found it. Section 9.4 was very thorough. May I ask why you wrote it? Watched a sister facility get destroyed by a sloppy handoff in 2019. Cost the CFO his career. Section 9.4 was just protection, belt and suspenders. Indeed, Mr. Doolan, are you available for a consulting engagement? Depends on the scope and the timeline. Anatolia Petrochemical is currently evaluating 6 other potential acquisitions in the United States petrochemical sector. We require an experienced consultant to lead our regulatory due diligence for all 6. We are prepared to offer an 18-month exclusive contract. I asked what the rate would be. He told me. I had to put the phone down for a second to keep my voice steady. I'm available, Mr. Demir. When do you need me to start? Day 165, Monday morning. Anatolia Petrochemical issued a press release announcing the withdrawal of its acquisition offer for Gulf Cyprus Industries, citing material regulatory disclosures discovered during due diligence. The wire services picked it up by mid-morning. Gulf Cyprus stock. They were a small-cap public company, opened down 28%. By close, it was down 41%. By the end of the week, 3 different law firms had filed shareholder lawsuits. Texas Commission on Environmental Quality announced an investigation. OSHA Region 6 confirmed they were reviewing the regulatory standing of the facility. The Beaumont Enterprise ran a front-page article titled, "How a Forgotten Compliance Manual Killed a $267 million Deal." They didn't mention me by name. I didn't need them to. Day 178. Hank Marbury announced his retirement to spend more time with family. Day 184. Preston Marbury was placed on administrative leave pending an internal review. By day 197, he'd been transitioned out of his role. His LinkedIn updated to say he was exploring opportunities in operational excellence. Day 211. I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Curtis, this is Preston. I hope we can connect about industry best practices. No hard feelings. I read it twice. I deleted it. Then I poured myself a second cup of coffee and went back to work. 6 months after the deal collapsed, I moved my consulting practice into a real office. Second floor of a small building on Pearl Street in downtown Beaumont, 2 blocks from the old Crockett Street Entertainment District. Nice corner space, 2 windows facing the bayou. Brenda came on full-time. We hired a junior associate, a young woman named Jocelyn Bridger, fresh out of Lamar University with a chemical engineering degree. Anatolia's 18-month contract turned into 36. Then they brought me in as a permanent senior advisor for their North American operations. Corner office in their Houston regional headquarters, 22nd floor, view of Buffalo Bayou and downtown. I split my weeks between Beaumont and Houston. Trevor finished his master's and took a job with Anatolia's safety division. He got the offer on his own merits. But I won't pretend the family name didn't help open the door. Gulf Cypress Industries declared Chapter 11 about 14 months after the failed acquisition. The OSHA fines came in lower than the original projection. Final settlement was $11.2 million. But the EPA penalties, the shareholder suits, and the loss of 2 major customer contracts finished what was left. The cracker units were sold to a Korean firm. The dock facility was sold to a Houston-based midstream operator. The headquarters building was leased to a regional logistics company. Hank moved to a condo in Naples, Florida. I heard from Beverly he plays a lot of golf now and doesn't talk about Texas. Preston's LinkedIn went through 3 more operational consulting iterations before he finally took a job at his uncle's marketing firm in Chicago. About a year after I moved into the Pearl Street office, I drove past the old Gulf Cypress headquarters on a Saturday morning. They'd taken the sign down. The parking lot was empty. The flagpole was bare. I thought about all those Tuesday morning meetings, the donuts I used to bring, the maintenance crew that depended on the safety protocols, the truck drivers, the operators, the contractors, the whole ecosystem that ran because somebody, somewhere, made sure the paperwork was right. Then I drove on. That afternoon, I stopped by Esperanza's coffee shop. She'd added a couple of tables out front since the weather was nice. I ordered a café de hola and sat by the window. She sat down across from me with her own cup, which was unusual. She didn't usually take breaks. "You look different these days, Curtis." "Different how?" "Like a man who is no longer waiting for something." I thought about that. She was right. For 13 months I'd been waiting, not for revenge, for verification, for the world to confirm what I already knew. "How's your boy?" she asked. "He's good. Got engaged last month. And your work?" "It's good too. Hector used to say something about the docks. He said the men who really run a place are the ones who know which valve to close when something goes wrong. The owners, the executives, they think they run it. But they don't. They just collect the money." "Hector was a smart man." "Yes, he was. We sat there for a while in the Texas afternoon, drinking coffee, not saying much. I was 53 years old, with a son about to get married, a thriving business, and a contract that paid me more in a quarter than my old company used to pay me in 3 years. Some men spend their careers trying to be visible. I spent mine making sure I knew where every emergency shutoff valve was located, both literal and figurative. My only mistake at Gulf Cypress was assuming someone else would read the manual after I left. They didn't. They didn't replace me. They just deleted me. And in industries where the regulations are written in scar tissue from people who got hurt, you don't get to delete the person who knows where the bodies are. The system has its own memory. Preston had called my department operational drag. He'd called experience a cost center. He'd called process safety legacy overhead. Turns out experience isn't overhead. It's insurance you don't pay for until the day you don't have it. By then, the premium gets a lot more expensive than the salary you cut. A $267 million lesson, give or take. Cheap in the long run. If anybody at the next company actually learned from it. But I'm not holding my breath. There's always another Preston coming up the ladder. Always another nephew, another stepson, another newly minted MBA with a Yeti tumbler and a slide deck. Which is why business, as I told my son the other day on the phone, is going to be good for a long, long time. You don't even know how good. I've thought about that 13-month stretch a lot since it ended. The waiting, the quiet, the way Preston Marbury walked into that quarterly meeting with a Yeti tumbler and reduced 11 years of my life to a number on a slide. What I keep coming back to is this. None of what happened to Gulf Cypress was bad luck. It wasn't fate. It wasn't karma in some mystical sense. It was cause and effect, plain and clean. Preston eliminated a function he didn't understand. He skipped the paperwork that would have transferred the responsibility correctly. He assumed software could replace a human being who had spent 18 years in uniform learning where things go wrong. Every one of those decisions had a price tag attached to it. He just couldn't read the tag because he'd never bothered to learn the language it was written in. That's the thing about consequences. They don't argue with you. They don't care how confident you sounded in the meeting. They don't care whose steps on you are. They just arrive on the schedule the rules set for them. I think a lot of folks watching this might be sitting where I was a year and a half ago. Maybe you got walked out of a job you gave your best years to. Maybe somebody half your age told you that your experience was overhead. If that's you, I want to say something carefully because I don't believe in cheap advice. Don't burn anything down. That's the trap. The system Preston was part of expects you to come back angry, to sue loudly, to badmouth the company on LinkedIn. That's the script. The people who actually win the long game don't follow that script. They document, they prepare, they keep their integrity intact, because integrity is the only thing nobody can fire you from. That's the moral piece. The wisdom piece is harder. Wisdom means knowing the difference between what you can control and what you can't. I couldn't control Preston. I couldn't control Hank. I couldn't control Hank. I couldn't even control whether anyone at the company would ever read Section 9.4. What I could control was whether I left clear instructions, whether I kept my certifications current, whether I treated my last day at Gulf Cyprus with the same professionalism as my first. And the third piece, endurance. Trevor asked me on day one what I was going to do about his tuition. I didn't have a perfect answer that night. I had a plan and some savings and a reputation. That had to be enough. The first 3 months of consulting were thin. There were weeks I wondered if I'd miscalculated, but you keep showing up. You answer the phone. You finish the contract. You earn the next one. Esperanza's husband Hector worked the docks for 31 years. Nobody put his face on a magazine. Nobody wrote a feature about him. But the cranes ran because men like him knew how to read the manuals. The world is built by people whose names you'll never learn. Be one of them, and you'll never have to wonder what your work was worth. The bill always comes due. Make sure when it does, your name is on the right side of the ledger.